of briefing presentation of the report on the activities of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine for the second half of 2018. And today we have Artem Sitnik, Director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. Welcome. Good afternoon to all the journalists. Yesterday I signed a letter and sent a report of the NABU to the parliament, to the president, and traditionally this is the 8th report that we've prepared after I was appointed as the head of NABU. And traditionally, briefly, we present the results of our work, what happened during the last half year, and briefly I would like to tell the main information, and after this you will be able to ask your questions on the topic. Before going to the criminal cases and the figures that we've reached during the last half year, I would like to say that for me it is pleasant to start this report this year with information that the Anti-Corruption Court will become a reality soon. And each time we ended our report that the main challenge to NABU, that despite the investigations we have and that we bring to court together with SEPO, no one is in jail, and it is used in order to carry out media campaign against Anti-Corruption Bureau, and society waits for results, not in the form of arrests, but in the form of proper decisions by court and the return of money to the budget. This money that was got illegally. And now this decision is at the final stage, and we actively participated in this. And the memorandum adopted between Qualification Commission of Judges that carry out the selection of judges and the Anti-Corruption Court, we had a memorandum, and we studied all the candidates who applied for this contest, and also, International Experts Council participate in the selection, and they have all the materials, and now all doubtful candidates were rejected by the council, and now we see the final stage of this contest. And using this opportunity, I would like to express gratitude to international experts for their professional activity in this case and creation of Anti-Corruption Court. And also I call on competent bodies and court administration to decide all legislative issues in order that this court start its activity and start to review those cases that society knows about, and we all wait for results in this. And we've prepared about 200 criminal proceedings that are now in courts, and they wait for creation of Anti-Corruption Court. And we said about it many times that cases are delayed in courts. And I won't go in detail about the cases, but the trend of the last half year, out of 28 criminal proceedings that were brought to court, only in 8 cases the judges started the consideration, and others are delayed, and this is not acceptable. And we have to state once again that our work is delayed in the courts, and our efforts are have obstacles in this. And in the last half year, 44 people were served charges, and 61 cases closed, and cases, 2 cases are brought to court about top corruption, and there are many resonance and unique for Ukraine cases, and I would like to go into detail about some of them. One of the cases that was really difficult about the embezzlement of funds of state enterprise of the seaports, and 247 million were embezzled, and it happened not before the revolution. It happened recently, and the investigation that ended, and people were brought to responsibility. These are 10 people, and 8 cases now are transferred to court. And also, I would like to remind to you that the main priority of the work of NABU was and is the investigation of corrupt schemes in the sphere of state enterprises, and I stated it, and once again I would like to repeat that state enterprises, they are and they continue to be the source of political corruption in the country, and only in one case we had 247 million, so you can imagine what money goes to the elections and formation of actions in the parliament and so on. Also, we completed the criminal proceedings about chemical and mining companies. This is also state company. It has unique raw materials, but corrupt schemes prevent opportunities to privatize this company and to provide profit. And the losses during investigation phase is $13 million of USA, and the indictment is brought to court now. And also we brought to court a criminal proceeding about the official of SBU who tried to extort $47.5 thousand, and this case is interesting because before our operation was disrupted in migration service, and it brightly shows what motives were for the disruption of this investigation that was made undercover. The investigation against our workers is brought to the NABU, and this case is brought to court now. Also, a known case brought to court about 2 people's deputies. This is Amber case, and the behavior also differs in the court and in the media. In the media, we see these people in the media, and they actively respond, and they didn't show up in courts, and there is delay of court hearings from the very start. And this shows once again that detectives did their job properly and collected evidence. And that's why we have the issue why these suspects delay the consideration of their cases. Recently also a case was completed about Anishchenko, and this is the big part of the case of the fiscal service head and several other officials from the mining industry, and those people who embezzled 3 billion of hryvnias. Now the investigation is over and the case is completed, and recently the indictment will be brought to court. Among the cases, also the cases of high officials of the armed forces of Ukraine and the Department of Tanks and the tank plant cases, and also many cases are brought to courts, and also the cases about the head of Odessa mayor's office, and this case is also heard in court now. And also I would like to bring an example how we can lessen this corruption, and I would like to show this on the example. The number of cases is completed in the sphere of procurement in Ukrzaliznytsia enterprise. The losses about 1.5 billion hryvnias, and one of the recent cases is the case where one of the potential figures is one of the people's deputies, and twice the SAPO prosecutors addressed the General Prosecutor's Office in order to provide a notice to the Parliament in order to deprive him of deputy's immunity. And there are many cases and the losses are great, and several tens of suspects are present, and the separate department of NABU deals with this work. This case of the procurements in Ukrzaliznytsia and the new leadership of Ukrzaliznytsia. We have good working contact with the representatives of the supervisory board and leadership of Ukrzaliznytsia, and the level of corruption and the level of embezzlement that Ukrzaliznytsia now is reducing. And we do not only investigate the cases, we also establish proper cooperation with the leadership. So this head of enterprise, he was appointed, and there are also steps in cooperation with NABU and the revelation and exposure of these corrupt schemes. And unfortunately, in other cases, in the magnesium plant and other cases, we initiated the question to change the leadership and to bring those responsible to justice. But in this, we didn't succeed, and there are many losses and suspects in courts and in pretrial investigation. But we have this case of Ukrzaliznytsia when joint actions of NABU and the leadership of the state enterprise, it brings positive results. There are not many cases like this, but I believe that I will be heard in the government and proper actions will be taken in other state enterprises.
If talking about state enterprises, the total amount of losses in the cases I mentioned is more than 18 billion hryvnias. The total amount of losses is hundreds of billion hryvnias. In the cases which are being investigated by the NABU, the total amount is much higher. The amounts of those IMF tranches and final decisions in these cases and adequate measures upon consideration of the cases will provide lots of funds for the national budget of Ukraine. In the second 6 months of 2018, they were investigated very cynical schemes such as embezzlement of public funds by Ukrcosmos state enterprise. There was a chance to launch a satellite to the Earth's orbit, but the funds were embezzled, and embezzlement by a shut bank of Ukraine, the amount embezzled, the amount misappropriated by the suspects was $20 million. We sent the issue to the parliament, but there were not enough votes collected. We now see that there are investigations, there are suspects, and there are proofs which show that the MPs, some MPs are involved in crimes, but unfortunately our submissions to deprive them of immunity were not satisfied. Talking about reimbursement of losses in the cases, the tool is a sentence, the verdict of the court, and you can see in the report, which we will disseminate among you upon completion of the briefing. The figure is 9 billion, which could become the reserve of national budget of Ukraine. Unfortunately, this money are only potential assets of the state. I hope that, as I have already said, the anti-corruption court will start operations and the situation will be improved. At this stage, how can we reimburse the losses? Maybe by voluntary actions of some suspects. In 2018, 200 million hryvnias were returned on voluntary basis by the suspects, but it is only a drop in the sea. And this money have already been transferred to the budget of Ukraine, and the NABU has such powers which are very interesting to submit claims to have a statement that the contracts are void, invalid. These powers was not understood by the figures in the cases, but now when the organizers of corruption schemes, they understood that this is a strong power, but they now submitted, the suspect submitted the claim with the constitutional court. They want this our power to be recognized invalid. Now I would finalize my speech. The problems in courts we still have, but in comparison with our previous reports, in this report we may state that there are good developments in this situation. There are people who have moral and personal qualities which will allow them to become good judges of anti-corruption court, and I would like to call on them not to fear, although the work of judges and the work of staff of NABU always is under pressure, but I call on potential judges of the anti-corruption court that I still hope that the operations of anti-corruption court will hear the cases and return the money to the national budget of Ukraine, and the joint activities of NABU, SEPO, and anti-corruption court will guarantee success. All these three institutions should be independent. It is most important. On the part of NABU, I will say that we have been doing and we will be doing everything to remain independent and to cooperate with SEPO and potential anti-corruption court. I would like to thank my colleagues from NABU who always have been working in not easy conditions, and I would like to thank mass media, journalists, and the international partners for their support in development of the NABU. Some anti-corruption prosecutors who work jointly with our detectives. Thank you very much for your attention. Now we have time for questions and answers. Novikov Oleg, the word and the action. The General Prosecutor's Office returned to your to NABU the case. The submission of the case. I would like to notice that the detectives they collect evidences in some case, and when the prosecutor believes that there are enough proofs, then the materials are submitted to the documentation is submitted to the General Prosecutor's Office. How the submission to the General Prosecutor's Office takes place, I do not know. We do not see this because it is not our job. It is the job of SEPO. Maybe the category of cases which concern e-declarations will have better development, and in the case of a shut bank, even the committee supported our stand, but you know the result. That is why something tells me that we will have no positive considerations of any category of cases before the new elections. But some decisions will be taken because they all cases could not remain delayed with no judgments. So the work continues, and some projects are sent to prosecutor's office. Today when got information that the case has been initiated against Gontariva for 150 billion hryvnias embezzlement of funds of the persons who deposited money with the banking system. Talking about this case, I can say that corruption crime cases, they are fact cases. As concerns the National Bank of Ukraine, there is a whole range of cases which are under investigation in NABU, and the suspicion has not been given to Ms. Gontariva yet. This is the whole technology when someone, this concerns not only NABU, this concerns also the Bureau of Investigations. When there are declarations of claims, then the claim is initiated and the whole way starts. This is the technology that should be changed via amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code. Article 214 gives many grounds for violations that could be used in the election campaign. Are there any factors which NABU can use so that NABU is not used in the election campaign as a mechanism of influence? This concerns not only election campaign period. Sometimes I read the news that NABU would be used for pressure. If we compare the code which we had before, there should have been grounds for initiating the claim. Now there are no grounds, only some reasons. This concerns all law enforcement agencies which try cases of corruption, and this will not be cancelled in the shortest term. 1 week ago there was a whole range of news that the NABU was made to register the case against Prime Minister. This is the aspect of technology, the example of technology which I am talking about. There are some preventive mechanisms in our in-house regulations. We try to analyze every claim filed with us to minimize the risks which you mentioned in your question, but unfortunately when a law enforcement body analyze the claim and sees that this is manipulation but not the declaration of suspect suspected crime, but this body cannot change the situation, and Parliament talked much about this, and maybe in election campaign this would be used. Harasyan Vitaly, in your report you tell about 244 cases concerning lead plots. Whether in this case, Mr. Martinyuk from Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Top Management of State Cadastre Service are figures in this case. The land is the main national resource according to the Constitution of Ukraine, and our state agencies which are responsible for land issues, they have been reformed dozens of times, but this has changed nothing. And very many top management officials, top officials of agencies are figures in this case. We cannot name the figures in the case. I cannot tell you the surname. Krylo Poltavets 112 TV channel. What about the case of Stolarchuk? What is the stage of its development? The court has not accepted it for hearing. And the case of what is the perspective in the case? The case was registered not so long ago. Yesterday, I saw that some scandal, there are attempts to make some scandal of the case of potential embezzlement of 2 million hryvnias in buying mineral fertilizers in Ukraine. You know who can be involved in this. One oligarch can be a figure in this case who also enjoys the opportunity to declare his stand at some TV channels. We have not planned the search in this case. In this case, was the judgment of the court for the temporary access to documents, but the Agrarian Fund issued a certificate to the detectives of our bureau that these documents have been seized by the General Prosecutor's Office. So we searched their office and we found these documents. So it was the sanctioned search, and the whole range of documents were seized. And the Agrarian Fund wanted us to compile the list of all these documents. Now this search is close to end. The Обозреватель magazine, there were proofs about 100 and about 15 million hryvnia embezzlement. The court dismissed the proofs of NABU. Does this mean that the court the case about procurement by trade commodity of fuel, this case has been completed. The suspicions have been amended, and I I worry about your knowledge that this was the only proof in this case. Maybe this is the defender's stand. The court who you say dismissed the only proof. This is the same court which issued a judgment to ban Uliana Suprun, acting Minister of Healthcare activities. So this is very controversial decisions which this court issue. So about the losses amount is not the proof. The suspicions which have been given and that have been changed now, they are the suspicions based on the opinions of experts who conducted expert assessment in this case. Will you respond to criminal schemes of Mr. Fuchs, who is the citizens of Ukraine, the oligarch named Fuchs? Our competence is to try to investigate the cases of civil servants. If this citizen is a civil servant, then our bureau will respond. Olena Kurbanova, I would like to add the question about Gontareva. The mass media says that January 10th was the day when the claim the case against her was initiated. We know that Mr. Kolomoisky sponsors this campaign as mass media. Whether the NABU members of staff are connected to Mr. Kolomoisky, can you tell us? Responding to this question, you know that we have the case against Privatbank, and the sitting will be today. Why the NABU investigates it? Because not only top managers of Privatbank actions are investigated, also a Bank top management of persons actions are investigated by us. So there was some exchange of information. You know, there is a detective agency, Kroll, and they provided the materials of the investigation. The facts of violations in this bank were found by Kroll. So the intensive campaign in mass media sources is connected not only with Kolomoisky, oligarch Kolomoisky. So we shall make conclusions later. Oleg Krisanov, Boss TV channel. There is much information on the internet about corruption schemes in the state enterprise, Zerno Corporation. Whether the NABU investigates the cases, if you have not investigation, when you plan to investigate this case. You know that in our report, the first case was started at the beginning of 2016. The losses were about 150 million hryvnias in that case. Then the larger case was initiated. We investigated in this case one known oligarch from Russia, and we tried to serve him with charges at Monaco. This is what I can already tell you. The KZPU, this is the case where there is state agency which is in charge of holding public funds, and where public funds are in question, there are some people who try to embezzle them. If you have some data, please give to us and we will use them in the investigation. I have also a question about agrarian fund. Do you use the state fund investigation, whether you consider also audit of international auditors? Of course, we consider all the proofs, all the evidence, both pro and contra these aspects. We have not scheduled this search, but I told you the reasons why we conducted this search. When we have the documents which we have seized today, when we learn this document, upon the analysis, we will take a decision. To this end, we conduct investigation, but we cannot focus our attention on only some one proof. We use the whole array of evidence to make decisions. We also have prosecutors who may not agree with our position. Now the investigation is underway.
Recently, we got information about the case carried out by NABU about officials of funds of deposits guarantee, about the Department of Anti-Corruption Department, and Zarkhaladnitsky said to Zik that he doesn't have any information on that. Do you have information about fund of deposits guarantees? Going back to what we've said, our position is like this, that the case on some people, there should be proper suspicion about the person, and we didn't serve any charges to the employees of this organization, but there are investigation on this institution, and time will tell what results we will have. Bogdan Karbeni, Nash Media Platform, what is your attitude to Nazar Khaladnitsky, and how do NABU and SAPO cooperate? I hope there won't be such a question today. So my personal position, if you analyze it, I am at this position for a long time, and I was always correct about officials and law enforcement officials. We should be professional in our activity, and what I say is that is the result of joint work. Without the signature of prosecutor, the decisions of investigators do not have legal force. And I would thank the prosecutors, and they work efficiently with investigators, and I hope that we will succeed in our activity. Elena Kondratenko, I have a question about Lachevsky case in September. And allocated 2 months for the completion of the case. Then there was decision of the court that it all ended. And what is the stage? Do you have such information? And about one of the episodes of this case, the detectives prepared the draft charge. And now it is in anti-corruption prosecutor's office, and I believe that it is grounded, and I hope that it will be agreed with the prosecutor. Alexander Kachina, Chronic news outlet. In your interview to Glavkom, head of SAP, Khaladnitsky said the General Prosecutor's Office started the case on your assets in Crimea, and also about, we would like to ask you whether this case was started, whether you were brought to some interviews, interrogations. So fortunately, now people are not brought to such interrogations. Procedures are in place. The higher the position in NABU, the more cases the State Bureau investigates. So there are many cases, and they didn't bring me a ZIG TV channel. Are there any verifications? Maybe I'm speaking about brothers, Dubnevich's brothers, and the declarations, e-declarations that should be properly verified. So we verify more declarations than NACP. I cannot give you the conclusions. I cannot tell you about the conclusions we got, but there are not many. There are several opinions when the agency carry out verification and makes requests to us. I won't speak about separate cases, but there are some cases. No, I will bring an example. So you know that the number of divorces among the officials, the divorces are on the rise, so they want to hide some assets and they divorce, and then it appears that this is a fake divorce in order to avoid e-declaration. And the NACP does not have resources to assess it all in complex, that they live together, they together cross the border to go on vacations, and there is access to registers and operative and investigative opportunities. And when NACP lack data, we provided these materials to them, and then we read that they do not want to take these materials into consideration. And now, maybe you've read maybe you read yesterday, Roman Nasarov declared $300,000 that are in Great Britain accounts, and now the prosecutors put the question about the arrest of this fund, but this money appeared for the first time, but this money was there before, so we wait for the response of NACP on the situation. I do not hear the question. The competence of NACP is broader. We assess declarations exclusively in the framework of our competence. You write requests to us that, for example, people's deputy or someone else enriched illegally, and we do not address to NACP. Before we wanted to do this, and I proposed cooperation before, but it didn't happen. We analyze declarations, and our analytical department does this. And if we see that there is that something is wrong with it, so we then start investigation. So we do all this by our own forces, but they have broader circle of responsibility. Not all the subjects that are under NACP jurisdiction are under our jurisdiction. And also they deal with administrative violations, and we deal only with criminal violations. And if we see that this is administrative violation, we may send materials to them. So there are separate proceedings, and I believe that this proceeding is more interesting, and it is important, and I told you about it because Ukrzaliznytsia is a big share of a state sector, and we want to go to the top, to those people who organize all these things about which we carry out investigations. 2 more questions, please. Thank you, Irina Chernysh, Voice UA. During his presidency, Poroshenko enriched himself, and can you comment on this? Any enrichment if it is illegal, we will deal with it. But I would like to state that current president is not under investigation of our bureau. Current president is not. Do not include this political acuteness to your question. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for this constructive dialogue. If you have questions, press service will help you to find answers in the framework of our competence. Thank you, Svetlana. Here, people are present who do not know Svetlana. And if you have questions to me about investigations, and yesterday there were calls about this fund, and now you have opportunity to speak with Svetlana, and she will always respond to your requests. Thank you and have a nice day.